The top 100 agents are the best of the best, listing and selling more than any other agent in Australia.
So, congratulations, sir. Well done.
These are the practices, actions and beliefs of the most successful agents in Australian real estate. Raw, honest and completely uncut. Welcome to REB's Secrets of the Top 100 Agents.
Well, g'day everyone, it's Liam Garman, Managing Editor of Real Estate at Momentum Media, the team that brings you real estate business, and very fortunate to be here with Tim McKibbin, CEO of REINSW, again 2 weeks in a row. Tim,
great to be back,
podcast.
Liam. I must have done something right to be invited back, so that's great.
Did. Yeah, I mean, it was a fantastic chat. For our listeners, we spoke about all things property and in particular those data points. I think is a good way of putting it, those economic points that are impacting property. And today, as promised, we're going to be talking about agents and how you're supporting agents and some of your insights, Tim, into areas of education, stress, turnover, things that agents are facing and that they talk about quite often. And I think the best place to start, Tim, is that we know at the moment there is a high rate of turnover in the real estate industry, especially among new agents that have just joined. What drives that churn?
Well, look, I think a lot of people would have their own opinions. Here's mine. So if we go back pre-2002, so back, let's say last century, isn't it? It took 3 years study to become a real estate agent. So you went to TAFE for 3 years, and that was part-time, or you did full-time 12 months. That's how long it took to learn the craft. Now it's a matter of days.
Yeah.
And this is where I can't reconcile this in my mind. If it took 3 years back then, and now the world has become more complicated, there's more legislation, more requirements, more everything, and we need less education. And to me, that screams at me as ridiculous.
So what's the REINSW? What's your official policy on this?
Mate, we have been screaming from the hilltops to improve the amount of education that people receive coming into the industry. And what happens is, and you alluded to it at the outset, about the churn that we see in the market. 80%, that's 80% of new entrants to real estate leave in the first 12 months.
80%. I can't picture an industry which would be that high.
80%.
Yeah, I can't picture an industry that would be that high.
Yeah. So somebody challenged me on that once, and I sent them the data where I got it from, and that comes from the Office of Fair Trading.
It's a pretty legitimate
That's
source.
their data, not mine.
And just dwelling on that note, if you had to do a 12-month course full time or 3 years part time, you've bought into it. On the one hand, you've bought into it. So, when I was at university, Tim, I think I changed. Well, I always had my finance major, but I changed the degree that I was doing once or twice. I changed my second major probably 4 times. And then on my 4th time, I didn't even do a second major because I just couldn't be bothered by the end because I'd already been there for 3.5 years. You have those times when you're a young adult to trial and test things. You don't really get the chance to trial and stress test your career if you're doing it online over 3 days.
No, and look, you've made a good point. I'm a lawyer and I went to uni for 5 years to become a lawyer. Now, if you invest 5 years of university and you go to work one day and you have a shocking day in your career, you've made your decision. You have to pick yourself up and you have to come back the next day.
It's your trade by that point.
You've made a commitment, and I think they were your words. You've said you've made a commitment to that craft, and you've got to stick it out. Whereas if you've made a commitment of less than a week and you have a bad day, well, you don't turn up tomorrow, and that's a problem. Now, the second issue is that people aren't being given the skills they need, and from the outside looking in, you say, this is not that hard. Being a real estate agent, how hard could it be? I stand at the front with a for sale sign, so somebody buys the property, and I make a lot of money. it is infinitely more complicated than that. Understanding contract law, understanding your actual property that you're selling, your product that you're selling. And for that reason, we see this churn rate because they're underskilled. So we fail consumers by exposing them to people who are not properly trained, and we fail the student who wants a career in real estate by not preparing them enough. And that is our position, that we need to prepare the students so that they can have a career in what they want to do.
And I think everyone can picture a time throughout their career where they started a new job. They started a new job and you're 48 hours in and you're already going like 300 miles an hour and you're like, oh, wow, this is really hard. This is not what I thought it was going to be. So if you're a young agent, you step into that and you're like, why? I don't know the fundamentals because I was never taught them, and I didn't even know this existed. Of course, it would be overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I remember saying to a boss of mine in circumstances like that, it was just coming at me in all directions. And I said to him, does this get any easier? And he said, no, but you'll get better at dealing with it. And I think that is true of any industry that where you have high pressure, a high pressure industry. And when we talk about what is the agent's job, and the agent's job is to protect the vendor from selling their property lower than what they should be achieving for it. That's where that protection comes into it.
Yeah.
And unless you have those skills, you can't do that job.
Now, I was going to ask a question, but it almost seems a little bit redundant because I was going to say, if you've reduced it from 12 months down to a few days, surely there are important aspects or important courses, important subjects you've cut out. What were those subjects? And just logically off the top of my head, it'd be almost all of them. You can't. No one can become an expert of anything over 3 days.
No. The Office of Fair Trading, in their documentation that they publish, expect an agent to know 22 specific pieces of legislation. Now, not chapter and verse, but a working knowledge of 22 pieces.
That ain't happening.
You don't go near those 22 pieces of legislation during your training.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, there is an expectation from the regulator that you'll understand this, and the training that you're provided doesn't go near those issues. So it's crazy.
So in the world of REI, NSW, and Tim McKibbin, right? What would the gold standard look like if you had your magic wand and you said, okay, there's huge churn in the industry. We haven't set up our young agents for success. We own that. Let's start again. Let's create a pathway for accreditation. What would that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. And where I would start is at the end. So I would be saying, what does a really good agent look like?
And reverse engineer.
And work backwards from there. So what is it that you want me to know? We spoke about those 22 pieces of legislation that Office of Fair Trading says you should know. Well, that's fine. Let's put that on the table and work out what would be involved in having the student understand those, have a working understanding of that legislation. You'd work backwards to that, and then you'd look at the skills that a person needs to be that competent agent. But I'm unquestionably, what we're giving students now is grossly inadequate.
What are some of the other areas that you think are priority areas that really need to be on the table?
Look, I just think, and it's going to sound like I'm skipping out on your question, but it has to be everything. I mean, if it's only a matter of a few days that you call yourself a real estate agent, I mean that's ridiculous. It is.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's not a direct correlation, but Tim, I do about 2 property podcasts a day. I'm also the host of the Smart Property Investment Show alongside with Phil Tarrant, who you know very well.
Yeah.
And I write about it every day. I do webcasts on it. It's something I live and breathe. But when I still talk to, say, a broker or a buyer's agent who I'm working with for my own world, I still ask them, dumb questions. Or that might be dumb for them, it might be one-on-one for them. Now, this is someone who lives and breathes property that does it 8-9 hours a day, and I still defer to an expert. Say, hey, can you talk to me through this? Or what does this mean? What does that mean? Because you're deferring to that expert. If I, Liam Garman, do that for 70, 80 hours a week, week in, week out, that also does property in my spare time, a 3-day course ain't going to cut it to even understand the basics.
No.
And it's as simple as that. Taking a step beyond the accreditations and that technical knowledge, what skills and what attributes do you think are underutilized or under-focused on when we're training young agents?
Yeah, and again, you've got that black and white or the hard skill stuff, understanding the legislation and these sorts of things. And then the other side of it, obviously, because it's a people industry, about communication skills, being able to be relevant to somebody. I was once told that trust, the definition of trust is having a message at the time that it is important to the other person. Being able to have the skills to communicate that message and having empathy for the person that is in that position. So that's what we're talking about you, even though you're immersed in this all the time. If somebody's got a message that is relevant to you at that time when you're going to be involved in your acquisition or your sale, and they are skillful enough to be able to communicate that to you, and there is some empathy to in relation to what you're going through, because property transactions are massive. They're big. They're the sorts of things that you don't want to get wrong. You buy coffee and you're not happy with it, you drop it in the bin on the way down the street.
You ain't doing that with a house.
No.
Yeah.
You ain't doing that with a house. So those sorts of skills to be able to properly represent somebody is those communication skills. And again, we're setting people up to fail when we don't teach them the basics of being able to communicate. One of the things that I think real estate will be protected somewhat, at least in the foreseeable future from the likes of AI, is that it's a people industry. If I'm going to be selling my house, I want to talk to somebody I trust.
Not a bot.
No, I don't want. I think I'm a great fan of AI. By the way, we've put an AI bot onto our board. I think we're the first company in
yes, I heard about that
in Australia to do it. But and I think we have to as a business, as a representative body, we've got to lead that conversation, and we've committed ourselves to do that. But when it comes to our industry, people to people, that is where we have to focus our energies. And in the foreseeable future, I think we're protected, but we should focus energy on the people to people stuff rather than being removed. Agents spend about 11% of their time with their client and 89% of their time doing things for their client.
Yes. Yep.
That has got to be changed rapidly and significantly. We need to spend more time with our client. And when we're with our client, we're demonstrating our value. We're demonstrating our relevance. And when we're with them, providing advice. Through the process, and that protects us from technology as well.
Now, that has opened up a lot of questions, but I think that the main one that I have on my mind is: have you seen? I don't know whether REINSW has ever done any market research into this question, but where one might generate their leads from? Is it that traditional letterbox dropping, or where I would hazard a guess, it is often, I would guess more often from recommendations from people that have worked with an agent that they develop that trust with, as you were saying, and that would now personally recommend that agent to a family or a friend, and then using that as a lead generation tool, because you've serviced them, and therefore that will deliver you more leads.
Yeah, some of the question that you've asked, I think, is probably better directed to the marketing folks in our industry. But from where I sit, when I like everybody else in Sydney, my inbox, my letterbox, I should say, receives all of these pieces of paper.
Do you ever read them?
No, I pick them up and put them into the recycling, which sits right alongside of the letterbox.
See, at least you take it one step further. I don't even know if I recycle it all the time.
Yeah, I just pull them out and drop it into the recycling and go on. So I can only speak for me. That doesn't really have any impact. But I've got agents in my suburb that I think the world of. So I would go and work with them. I trust them. I know they're competent. But I guess I have the advantage of being in the industry. But nonetheless, if you're in that community, and you've been there for any length of time, then you will have those relationships. My personal view is you can't beat the promotion that a happy customer will do for you.
Yep.
You can't beat that. If they're walking the streets going,
this person's the best person ever, go. If you're looking to sell, go to him. And that was my gut feeling, which is that your greatest lead generation asset will be happy customers, which talks to what you're saying about rebalancing that time, finding efficiencies, and spending more time face-to-face with your clients. In terms of the comms aspect, and I see it all the time, especially when I see some communication from young members of our team here, and the way that you speak and you communicate via email. Sometimes I look at it and I'm like, mate, you can't write that via email. Like, okay, let's go through it. And I always I've had this adage for a long time that it takes, in my opinion anyway, it can take someone who's young 2 or 3 years to learn how to craft a good email to a client. That is a fundamental thing, because if you're not, the one thing it's if you're worried about giving bad news and you're being too ambiguous, you're not giving the deadlines, you're being sometimes too formal, sometimes too familiar, and you have to find the balance between all of them. Your point is 100% correct with the communication. Are there any other attributes that you've seen?
And again, I hark back to the 1,000 years ago. We overuse electronic communication.
Overuse?
It's ridiculous.
Oh, Tim, that's controversial. Yeah.
Well, no, it's not. You've probably, and we all have, you start out with an email with somebody who says, I think you've done all the wrong things, blah, blah. They write back and give you a serve, and you write back and this sort of thing. I'm going, no, I have never been in a situation where I've written back to somebody saying, oh, look, I'm 100% sorry, you are completely right. Or vice versa. It never happens. But if you want to solve a problem, here's a tip, pick the phone up, ring them. So can I talk to you about it?
Yep.
You will get a far better outcome. And again, this is back to the people-to-people thing. And what I think is a tragedy is we're losing that art of conversation. It is a people industry. I said to you about the 89% and the 11%, and we need to spend more time. Build a relationship with somebody, build a quality relationship with somebody, and that'll pay dividends for your entire career. And
that's really true. When I was starting off my career and I was at the tail end of university, I was an assistant to someone in the public sphere. We'll just leave it like that. And they said the same thing, which is you get an angry email, call them up. And he said, and I don't know how legal this is now in an HR perspective, he's like, let them yell at you, and there's going to come to a point about 25 seconds later where something's going to click in their brain, they've said their piece, and you're going to be profusely apologetic, and they're going to be like, oh, okay, thanks so much for listening to me. I really appreciate your time.
Right.
And then you're like, no, thank you for your time, and then you leave with an advocate.
Yeah, and that's right. That's right. But I mean, these email back and forward that people do, it's I think it's a huge mistake.
Yeah,
on
definitely.
a litany of issues.
You've got to hit the phones.
Or go and see somebody. If it's a big issue, rather than doing emails back and forward, actually go and if it's a big issue, and I've done this, I've said, look, I'd like to come and meet with you and talk to you about your concerns. I don't think I've ever had a bad outcome from doing that. If they've said to me, I'm happy to meet with you, and you go along, you listen, like you're saying, but you're not going to solve problems on email.
No, definitely not.
And the only reason that you send a document to somebody, in my view, and this is the lawyer in me, is to shore up your own position. That's the reason. And I tell people that the E in email stands for evidence.
Yeah.
And we forget that we're creating a document every time we send it. So I say, before you push send, ask yourself this question: would I be happy to have this email attached to the back of an affidavit and have it into the Supreme Court with a barrister asking me questions about it? Now, if your answer to that is no, don't push
Then
send.
don't hit send. Yeah, I think that is amazing advice, because not only do they open themselves up, but you also open yourself up to flow-on effects from miscommunication. That if you are too ambiguous, or if you're in different lines of communication, it creates a whole host of headaches for yourself. Now, about 5 minutes ago, you mentioned that you have a AI member on your board. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so this is Alice Ing, her name is, and we came up with that name after some thought, and her initials are AI. So we had a big moment in the office when we came up with that. Alice was born on a Wednesday. She went to her first board meeting on the Thursday, the following day.
Yep.
Then we did quite a lot of media, Alice and I, on the following day. At least Alice did, and then we're on Sky News on the Saturday, and it went on and on. But Alice became world famous. I was contacted by a conference in South Africa, and they wanted to interview Alice and I at their conference. So we came in virtually, and we did an interview there. Alice and I are going down to Melbourne in May to do another presentation down there. So it's for two reasons we've gone down this pathway. Well, three really. One is to show this is the future, and we want to lead it. We also wanted to generate efficiencies in the office, and Alice is able to crunch enormous amounts of data, and we can ask Alice opinion on things, and Alice is able to go and gather that data from multiple sources, come in and crunch all that up and deliver us answers. So she has within her immediate memory bank all of the legislation affecting those 22 pieces of legislation that I'm confident Alice knows them all. But outside of that, I'm not sure now. But Alice has all of those things, and we are able to ask Alice questions. And Alice, gives a lot of answers to that. But again, what it enables us to do is to do a better job of that hack work stuff, better quality outcome, and spend more time with the people that we serve. That's the goal. Better product outcomes, more efficiency, frees up time to be with the people that count.
And in so doing, you've set the bar. You've shown leadership in doing this, because people will follow. If you're, there will be people listening to this podcast that might be from smaller, independently owned offices that might not have the benefit of seeing how other people in their franchise or in their network are using AI. What are some of the really cool test cases of AI that you've seen?
Yeah, well, it's almost a daily exercise. I went down to visit Amazon at their invitation down in Melbourne, and it gives you another perspective about how the world is changing. I've gone a little bit off point here, but I'll bring it back. And when I went down there, I got talking to the folks that work there. And they're the typical black T-shirt. Unless you've got a black T-shirt, you don't count in
Real hipster. Very
yeah.
Birkenstock.
Well, yeah, you don't count in the AI world. In fact,
Yeah.
I had that whinge to a mate of mine, Peter Shervin, mate, who you may know, and he sent me 6 black T-shirts. So if you're out there listening, Pete. But I went down to meet with Amazon, and I left there a wiser person. But one thing I found really interesting, as part of their KPIs, these are the individuals there, they have to fail at a number of things per month.
Yeah, right.
So they have to try something, and they've got to fail, and they have to be able to report to their boss, and they say, I tried to do this, and I failed, and this is why I failed, and that's part of their KPIs.
I suppose it comes down to you're trialing new things, you're trying new processes, see if they work. Honesty as well. You're being honest to yourself that you found new ways of doing things. It's a very different way of using your brain.
Yeah, and we talk about having a safe environment where people can make mistakes. And in my career, that didn't always exist. You know, you were petrified about making a mistake.
100%.
But then as time's gone on, we've created environments where we can allow somebody to make a mistake. But this is the first time I've seen it where it is a KPI you will make mistakes. So if you haven't made a mistake or haven't made enough mistakes this month, you haven't hit your KPIs, which that takes it to a new level. But in that environment, people are learning, and there's no real shortcut in this. You've just got to go and play with it. Now, having had a long chat about technology, let me tell you, I hate it. I leveled out with tech about 2005 or 6. I just said it's too hard. You know, I'll employ somebody to do that. Thank you. And I've re-engaged with it, and the reason that I have is it's a different way of learning. I surprised myself here the other day. I was doing some coding.
Oh, Tim.
Yeah. Whoa. Yeah, fascinating, isn't it? But what I said to the AI system is, I want you to write me the code that will achieve this.
Yeah.
And it wrote the code. So now I'm coding.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's
fantastic.
That's ridiculous.
That is ridiculous.
So it opens up all of these opportunities for somebody. And I'm enjoying playing with it now and looking at what it will do. And I'd encourage everybody to, to spend an hour a week even just playing with it.
Yeah, it is amazing in the world of AI, and yeah, it does sound a little bit cliche, but you don't really appreciate it until you really try. And you don't realise the different facets of your business that can be updated by doing that, whether it's the legislation that you're saying with Alice or quickly retrieving data, speaking to kind of cold leads on your website as a virtual concierge. That's just scraping the surface. That's just stuff that we already know about, but there are going to be ways that you can do it. Now, Tim, as with all of our podcasts together, you and I chat too much and we just go on different tangents, which is great, but it means I've actually forgotten quite an important question that I wanted to ask you today, which is new obligations. So agents have new obligations around anti-money laundering compliance. What does that look like? It seems quite a scary topic.
And it is. If I had to describe it, I would say it's going to be more disruptive in an agent's office than COVID.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it's not going away. So COVID had an end. This thing won't. It'll be a huge disruption in agency practice. It is likely that you'll have to employ a person in your business to be a full-time compliance officer. We are working very closely with AUSTRAC right now to try and offer our members a solution in this space to the fullest extent possible, to be able to offer the policies and procedures they will need to adopt going forward. And I frankly don't think the overwhelming majority of agents out there fully understand what this is going to mean. Now, 12 months from now, we are supposed to have it in our office running. 12 months from now. And that's the bedding down phase. And as of the 1st of July 26, we have to have it going. And if we don't, then we're going to be penalised. So between the 1st of April and the 30th of June is the getting it sorted out in your office, where you won't be penalised, but you have to be demonstrating you're doing it. Then it goes live.
So you've got a full-time person working on compliance. What are some of the tasks that they will be undertaking?
You have to, with each person that so if you're acting for someone, or if somebody comes in to buy a property, you have to look at that person through the lens of whether or not they are potentially laundering money from drugs or from terrorism, these sorts of things. Because property is such a huge asset that people are using the real estate transaction to wash their money. We know it's going on.
But how you're probably going to tell me you're not allowed to tell me, but how do you go about that? Because
how do you go about?
Presumably, it'd be a cash into.
Yeah. Oh, well, certainly, if somebody walks into your office with a suitcase full of cash,
I think that'd be a bit of a compliance.
Yeah, that's
headache.
right. So that's not likely to happen.
Yeah.
But if
Amazon gift cards or something.
Yeah. But if you're getting money that's coming in from overseas, or it's coming through a variety of companies and trusts and these sorts of things, the procedures and the policies that you would have in your office to satisfy yourself that this particular the people involved in this transaction are not going about it for nefarious reasons, you have to go down that pathway. You have to assess the risk. And it is going to be huge. I mean, you might play this podcast in 18 months' time, and that section of it, and I really am just stating where this is going. It is going to be a massive impost on agency businesses.
So that one extra staff member would be for a larger office?
Yeah, I mean, if you are a small, say, a sole trader or something out in Broken Hill, for example, and all of your customers are friends and you've known them for 1,000 years, the risk that you are exposed to as a business for somebody washing money is minimal.
Yes.
So your procedures and your policies would be representative of the risks that you're facing. However, if you're in Sydney and that person out there wouldn't need a full-time compliance officer, small business and their market is such that they're not exposed to that risk. Conversely, if you're in Sydney and you're a large office and they're big transactions and the people that you're dealing with are sophisticated purchasers and vendors, etc., then your exposure is quite high, and you will then need to have policies and procedures that respond to that exposure, and you'll need to and those systems will require you, in all likelihood, to have a person in the office that is full-time in compliance. I recently went to New Zealand to go and have a look because they've been down this pathway a couple of years ago now, quite a few years ago, and I met with some of the people there. Their compliance officer sits on the as part of the management team, so that's where they have to be viewed in the business as part of the management team. The best way to describe them would be an internal auditor, I would say. So larger, bigger businesses will have an internal auditor. So in New Zealand, the compliance officer is probably akin to an internal auditor.
So let's say you're willingly negligent and you've you're in that big office and you've given it to Joe Bloggs as his part-time job. He's still doing sales on the side and he's doing it for a couple of hours a day. He's been late. He hasn't been up to date. He's just ticking check boxes and signing it. What are the risks to your business and to Joe Bloggs?
Well, there would be huge penalties that would be imposed on you potentially. I have to say potentially from Austrac. We have to do this, like it or not. We have to do it. We're fortunate that we've avoided it for so long, but we're in the second tranche now, as they call it. So the second tranche is going to be accountants, lawyers, and agents. I said to you, we're working with Austrac. We've got a good relationship with Austrac, and what we're trying to do wherever possible is to be able to not replicate the work of other people. So lawyers have the obligation, as do agents, and the argument we're putting forward is that if it has been done competently by one, then the other should be able to rely on it. Now, that's an ongoing conversation.
Which is, that's very logical. Tim, I think that is all we have time for today on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Now, if you do want to listen to more, we did have a podcast that was released last week where Tim and I discussed the property market and the real estate market more broadly right across New South Wales, vacancy rates, renting, supply, approvals, planning. We spoke about it all, so do go back on the podcast and listen to that. But that is everything we have time for today on the Real Estate Business Show. That was Tim McKibbin, CEO of REI NSW. But until next week, bye-bye.